We have more for your ears only. I'm Catherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Sitting here listening to this testimony, I don't believe it. No one believes it. That was House Republican Paul Ryan after IRS Commissioner John Koskinen said a computer crash has permanently eliminated thousands of emails wanted for the continuing probe of alleged partisan treatment of conservative groups seeking nonprofit status. Now this.
We're open to discussions if there's something constructive that can be contributed by Iran, if Iran is prepared to do something that is going to respect the integrity and sovereignty of Iraq.
The Iranians can provide some assets to make sure Baghdad doesn't fall.
The notion of the United States and Iran fighting as allies against Islamist extremist forces sweeping through large areas of Iraq rose last week with remarks by Secretary of State John Kerry and South Carolina's Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. But other GOP leaders saw it as dangerous, dancing with the devil, or worse.
And there were conflicting accounts of how significant a factor the Iraq situation was in ongoing international negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, which ended another phase last week with a Chinese envoy reporting progress registered, though differences may still be too deep to resolve. To consider all the complicated dynamics involved for your ears only, we're joined again by Abbas Milani, Director of Iranian Studies at Stanford University. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
What is your latest understanding of how many forces of what sort Iran already has in Iraq to defend the Shiite regime of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and Shiite holy sites in Najaf and Karbala?
Well, officially they have only few advisors. But I think de facto, they obviously have had a fairly large amount of assets in there for several years now. These are intelligence assets. These are IRGC commanders who have businesses there, who have front companies there. And by several reports, the commander of the Quds Brigade, Mr. Soleimani, has been in Baghdad coordinating the efforts of the militia, the Shiite militia.
That the Sunni forces of ISIS and its tribal allies in Iraq would threaten Shiite holy sites suggests how far back in the past their division within Islam goes. But we're also told the two sects lived relatively peacefully for long periods of time. Can a current political understanding restore that situation? And could Iraqi Sunni reject the ISIS fighters if the local Sunni got a better share of power and resources from Baghdad?
I would think so. I mean, I think if you look at the history of Islam, the number of times where Shiites and Sunnis have fought, and there have been many instances in the past where they have fought, and they have fought ferociously, but those numbers compared to the times where they have lived together rather amicably is small.
In Tehran, you've written, radical conservatives have a very different view of the ISIS onslaught that's prompted Washington to send a military mission back to Iraq.
The radical conservatives basically see this ISIS, or Daesh as it's called in Iran, as what they consider to be an Israeli-American creation in order to weaken Iran, in order to weaken Shiism, and in order to open the way for America's re-entry into Iraq. I don't think they've been reading Mr. Obama's announcements. They think that America is trying desperately to get back into Iraq, and thus they have helped create, with the money from Saudi Arabia, with logistical support from Turkey, this phenomenon called ISIS. On the other hand, the reformists in Iran don't see it that way. They think that ISIS is just a curse of Sunni anger, that it is a form of radicalism that needs to be contained if it is not to eventually engage Iran and the rest of the Middle East in a sectarian fight that no one, according to the reformists, and I think they're right, no one will benefit from.
So what chance do you see for some degree of cooperation or at least coordination of U.S. and Iranian efforts in Iraq?
I think there's a fairly good chance, and the fact that the Rouhani administration has been trying to reconcile with the United States increases this chance. But you have to remember, this is not the first time the United States and Iran will have been on the same side in fighting Sunni radicalism. When the U.S. was preparing to attack Afghanistan, Iran was providing, by all accounts, rather important logistical information, intelligence information, coordinating with the United States, allowing even flyover Iranian territory, agreeing to allow U.S. jets to come into Iranian territory to pick up any soldiers that might have come across.
What is your best understanding of how much discussion of the Iraq situation has taken place at the international negotiations over Iran's nuclear program?
There clearly has been talk. The Iranians admit it. The U.S. admits it. They have not divulged the extent of the conversation. They have not indicated how extensive they were. They have indicated that they are going to continue, although they're not going to be at the ministerial level. So I think one can say with certainty that there was discussion, and there are discussions, and there are ongoing discussions. And there are some people in Iran who, again, see nothing wrong with trying to coordinate and cooperate with the United States. And the other thing we have to remember is that even the radicals who protest, as some of the radical conservatives are protesting against any idea of cooperation, in the past we have seen them protest publicly and then privately be completely willing to coordinate with the United States if their own interests demanded. That's what happened in 2003, 2001. This is what happened in Iran-Contra episode. So there is a history of saying one thing by the radicals in public and doing completely different thing in private.
And we gather that reprinting in Iran in Farsi of an article you wrote suggests there may be some significant internal division on the nuclear issue. Tell us about that and what you wrote.
Well, I wrote an article with Sig Hacker, who was the head of Los Alamos, if you remember, for 10 years, and is one of the most respected nuclear physicists in America, and he's now at Stanford. And what we wrote was published in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and what we suggested is that if Iran really wants a peaceful nuclear program, as it repeatedly claims, there is a completely different way of going about it. They should follow the path of South Korea. South Korea began its nuclear program essentially at the same time Iran did. South Korea is now one of the major exporters of nuclear technology. They build reactors, compete with the United States and the best countries of the West in getting a bigger share of the market, and Iran has virtually nothing to show for it, in spite of all this enormous amounts of financial capital they have spent, political capital they have squandered, emotional damage they have wrought on the people. And if they look at it differently, if they realize that enrichment is not going to make them independent because they don't have enough uranium for even one reactor, they will need to import uranium anyway, then they can have a nuclear program that is a source of economic gain for Iran and a much less source of concern to the international community. And as you said, to our great surprise and pleasure, the Ministry of Cultural Guidance translated the article in its entirety and put it on their website.
Abbas Milani is Director of Iranian Studies at Stanford University.
Quote from the news, "Why don't we embrace this sacred status that God gave to women?" That was Morocco's prime minister telling Parliament that women should stay home and care for families, setting off a firestorm of objection on social networks and news media.
Next, deportation consternation on the Texas border and beyond, for your ears only.